Without much further ado, we do have another speaker that should dive us in, and this time we ask Jerome Alcantara. If I've pronounced your name correctly, Jerome, please do let me know. And Jerome specializes in labor and migration issues, specifically in combating human trafficking. And his efforts have been recognized by the US State Department, the Interagency Council Against Trafficking, and many other agencies. He's the executive director of the Blas F Ople Policy Center and Training Institute, which is a non-governmental institution dedicated to protection of Filipino migrant workers. And it works with stakeholders in rescue and repatriation of trafficked and exploited, and also looking at providing legal support and socioeconomic programs in terms of reintegration. So it really, I do see it going through the whole spectrum, Jerome, and you can take us through that. And I think Jerome can tell us a bit more about, how the center models and promotes innovation in terms of effective delivery of services to not just potential victims, but those who and their families as well. Jerome, in your presentation, could you just also tell us a bit more about how your experience has been in engaging the different stakeholders in rescue and repatriation, because this is what everybody keeps talking about. We're all talking about identification, prosecution, but I like that we are coming also to you where we talk about the rescue and repatriation of trafficked and exploited migrants in this case, and also if you can tell us a bit more about the role that civil society organizations have played in trying to realize this GCM objective and the challenges that you often face as a civil society organization. Over to you, Jerome.
Thank you very much, Paddy. You pronounced my name perfectly. Thank you very much. Good evening, good day to all of the other resource persons and the participants to this webinar. I am from a non-government organization. We are part of an intergovernmental council that combats trafficking in the Philippines. This is mandated by our anti-trafficking law. It created an interagency council against trafficking. And part of the council are 3 non-government organizations representing children, migrant workers, and women. So we are one of the NGO members, and basically that's how we work with government. The Ople Center has been around for more than a decade, and most of our work is on the rescue and repatriation of overseas Filipino workers. We are, as most of you may have known, we have one of the most strictly regulated, highly regulated labor migration management system in the whole world. We have a whole set of regulation and rules, and we also have very strict requirements for Filipinos who are going out of the country. But despite all of that, we still have most of the cases that are being handled by the Ople Center are actually cases of trafficking of overseas Filipino workers who passed through legal quote unquote migration channels. So that's a question for us also. How can that happen? One of the assumptions really in formulating most of the policies and most of the programs is that if we, that's quite the traditional prevailing notion for government, that if we pass enough laws, that we come up with enough programs, that we have enough regulations, then trafficking, especially if they pass through the legal routes, would not be happening in our country. But in our experience, that's not the case. No, most of the cases that we've handled are those of Filipino migrant workers who actually pass through legal migration channels. Part of the work that we do is that we serve as like a bridge from the community up to the government agencies level. We have an active media and social media presence, and most of the cases of families who report of exploited or trafficked overseas Filipino workers, they come to us for help, and we help them navigate through the whole process. That's one of the one thing about having a highly regulated labor migration management system is that there are so many different agencies, and it's quite confusing for the workers and the families themselves to navigate through all of this. You know, we have a different department for undocumented Filipino workers. We have a different agency which handles licensed recruitment agencies. We have a different agency which handles those who pass through legal migration channels. So it can get very confusing for the OF, for the workers and their families, and that's part of what we do. We help them navigate the whole process. We help them. It's because it has become such a labyrinthian system. There are so many forms to accomplish. You know, there are so many people to talk to. So that's also part of our role. We provide them with support. We help them fill up forms. And especially now during the pandemic, when most of the processes have gone online, you know, there are our government has been trying to innovate. You know, some of the case reporting system has been transferred online, but it's still a bit difficult for a lot of people to navigate and to access. So we help provide them with that. We also help ensure that there is transparency and accountability in the whole process. You know, in handling rescue, repatriation, and reintegration services, I think most of us have experienced delays, you know, sometimes even fatal, tragic delays in the actions of government. So part of our role is to make sure that we help government come up with case referral guidelines. We help them upgrade their systems and their processes to make sure that they stick to a specific time frame, which we have agreed upon in terms of conducting rescue operations, in terms of providing legal assistance, in terms of providing aftercare services. But I have to say that this was before the pandemic. You know, everything is in disarray right now. Most of the systems, most of the gains that we have built through the many years of collaborating with our partner non-government agencies, organizations in the Philippines, it's like in a bit of flux right now. We don't know how it will be operating now up to a few months or a few years from now. So that's all, and that's also part of, I think, what the role of civil society and the academe has to be. Now, one of our observations is that the especially our overseas Filipino workers, was really hardly hit by the pandemic. Now, there are 2.4 million Filipinos working overseas, and our estimate is that more than 1 million of them lost their jobs due to the pandemic, and more than 500,000 have already been repatriated. They've already been sent home to the here in the Philippines. So part of the problem that we are facing right now is how to detect and how to identify, how to screen who are the possible victims of trafficking from among those 500,000 Filipinos who have already gone home. And it's a daunting challenge, really. And there's very little that most of us can do because we are still in lockdown. The Philippines has one of the longest lockdown, I think, in the world. So there's still limited restrictions. So we are innovating as we speak on how we can help detect and how we can provide services to possible victims of trafficking who have been repatriated. And it's a daunting task. So government right now, I'm not sure if this is part of, probably later other countries can share, but we sense that the government is in a firefighting mode. Now they are putting bushfires here, putting bushfires there, and there's no really sense of coming up with an overall strategic plan in the future. And we are sure that the pandemic has changed the face of labor migration forever. And we are specifically looking at how the deployment cost has probably more than tripled or quadrupled for migrant workers. You know, transportation costs, plane fares have tripled. There's an increased cost in medical examination expenses, especially with COVID testing. And I'm not sure if employers are willing to foot the bill And that will be part of the vulnerability of workers who will be coming out. And for us in the Philippines, our knee-jerk reaction really is there are pool of unemployed, millions of unemployed right now because of the pandemic. So labor migration will again be the safety valve for our economy and for our society. And that's a problem because you will be faced with rising deployment costs. You will be faced with employers who may have also lost their a lot in the pandemic. So they might not be able or might not be willing to shoulder the expenses for their workers and might be negotiating for lower standards and lower levels of protection that what we have successfully lobbied for through the years. And we also have government's diminished capacity. I'm not. Our government is not really operating at its full capacity right now because they are, our embassies we have monitored have been locking itself down because most of the people are getting sick also because of the constant exposure. So it's also a cause of concern for us on how far government can take, especially in the context of labor migration, where we have really no option but to rely to governments of the Philippines and governments of the host countries to help our Filipino migrant workers. We're also very much concerned about the health of the legal, the financial health of the legal and legitimate recruitment companies, recruitment agencies, labor migration agents, because I think statistics here are something that there are like 17% of labor recruiters in the Philippines have already declared bankruptcy. And what would be available to the pool of people who will be looking for job overseas are mostly those who do not bother with the legal processes, do not comply with the law, and do not really care about monitoring the situation of their workers. So these are very difficult challenges that are up ahead that we will be facing. And I think it's part of the role of civil society, of the academe, and for basically most of us here right now to really prepare for that future, to anticipate that future and to try to influence government, to try to influence intergovernmental and bilateral institutions to start looking at these problems because this will be biting us sooner than we expected. So I'll probably stop with that and get ready for the open forum. Thank you very much.
Jerome, thank you for taking us through that. I am taking notes and I am trying to pick questions as well from the chat box. So please, thank you very much for those questions that are streaming through for our panelists. Panelists, you are welcome to go through the questions on the chat box, but I will also bring them into our conversation now. But before we sort of get to our Q&A session, I just wanted to maybe just have Jerome, as you will come back in either in the question and answer session or as we will close later, you sort of talked about sort of this, the passing through the regular channels, right? That, even when we felt that as governments, as we felt it as even as at the local level that you have all the different loopholes filled in, I think what we often forget is that traffickers and smugglers are always one step ahead. It's like they already knew what you were thinking before you did it, and they would go ahead and find, even with the regular channels, find some other channels. And sometimes also the fact that you haven't had an available pathway, what remains as an alternative is for victims to fall in the hands of, for people who want to take that journey to improve their livelihoods, is to fall in the hands of traffickers, and in the last week, as we learned in the case of smugglers, and sort of to see, are they really providing an alternative route, that legal pathways are not providing. So I sort of thought, I wanted to bring this one back to you. And then another thing I wanted to bring back to you is to sort of this concept that you've talked about, looking at, post-COVID impact on migration, what it will mean for new migrants that are trying to make the trip, what it will mean for those migrants who have left their jobs. So this concept of being, stranded, then you become undocumented and possibly re-trafficked. Could you talk to us a little bit about, and if something that you have seen, with covering overseas Filipino workers, is this a trend that you have seen, or is this something that you can discuss us through, sort of looking at, trafficked, stranded, and then re-trafficked, and what this means?